Good evening. This is Marshawn Wally, Indianapolis Recorder columnist and moderator for the event this evening. I should note that the Indiana Citizen Education Foundation, which is joining this program, is a client of mine, where I wear a hat as CEO of Black Onyx Management. This evening, we're here to discuss an important and consequential development that occurs once a decade: the redrawing of legislative maps for Indiana's 9 congressional districts, 50 state Senate districts, and 100 House state representative districts. They also do local legislative districts, even school board races. We're going to explore the meaning of words like gerrymandering, cracking, packing, tacking. These are words that I didn't even know existed in the redistricting context, and the number of ways that Black and other people of color's votes can be diluted in the legislative process. So, we have a collection of outstanding panelists, including professionals and activists, who I will have introduce themselves now. First, we're going to start out with Bill Moreau. Please tell us about yourself, Bill. What is the Indiana Citizen Education and Foundation, and why'd you start it? What do you do?
Well, thank you. Yes, this is my attempt at failing retirement. I retired from the practice of law at the end of 2019, and as we got ready for that transition, my wife Ann and I formed a 501c3, the Indiana Citizen Education Foundation, to work on a chronic civic health crisis that Indiana has been in for decades. So before there was a public health crisis with COVID in 2020, Indiana had been in a decline across a range of metrics that measure a state's civic health. We've been stuck in the bottom 10 of states for voter registration, for civic literacy, and for voter turnout. So we formed this nonpartisan 501c3 to work in 2020 on voter registration, voter education, and voter turnout. And then when the calendar turned to 2021, we had built this information platform. So in 2021, we've been focused on reporting what's going on in the Indiana State House. And right now, there's nothing more important on the General Assembly's agenda than this once every decade process called redistricting.
Wow, that's very important work. I feel like I remember reading about that in the newspaper when you founded that, failing at retirement. That's awesome. One of the other people that I remember reading about in the newspaper is Rima Shahid. I've heard about Women for Change, but maybe members of our audience have not. Why did your organization form? And just can you tell us, what do you do, and why does redistricting matter to your organization?
Thank you. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. A big thank you to the Indianapolis Recorder, to Black Onyx, and to the Indiana Citizen Education Foundation for having me this evening. I'm really excited to be here. Women for Change started in 2016 when our co-founders got together and they felt that there was a loss in civility in how we spoke to one another and about one another. They also felt that voter access is fundamental to our democracy. And that is true today. And that's why we're here talking about redistricting. Today, coincidentally, is International Day of Democracy. I think now we have a day for everything, between National Waffle Day to National Bosses Day. And today is International Day of Democracy. I can't think of a better way to honor and preserve our democracy than to be involved in the redistricting process and to make sure that we have fair, competitive districts and elected officials that represent their constituents. And that's why Women for Change will continue to advocate for voter access, continue to advocate for people, and continue to advocate for women, because when you involve a woman and when you affect the life of a woman, you don't just do that for that particular woman or her family, but her overall community. And that's why it's vital that women are first and foremost at the fight.
I think that's outstanding. I've never heard of International Democracy Day, and I just learned something new. And I think it's important that you learn something new every day. International Democracy Day. I also didn't know that there was a waffle day either. So my son loves waffles, so that's good to know. We have with us as well Dr. Clyde Powell. Dr. Clyde Powell, thank you for joining us. You're a pastor, and I know you focus on urban ministry, and you get a lot of opportunities to engage with the people, and I know that you're an advocate on a number of issues. I've seen you at the City County Council advocating as well. What is this civic sin that people have been talking about? And it relates to, they're connecting civic sin to redistricting. How does that work? What is that?
Well, first of all, let me thank you for the invitation. I'm honored to be here. I don't think there's a more important subject than this relative to democracy in our city right now. So thank you for the opportunity to participate. First, relative to civic sin, that you are hearing pastors and some faith leaders use that term and connecting it with the gerrymandering, a portion of redistricting, and it is the notion that any attempts to bring division and separation into communities where the representation of those voices is weakened is an insult. It is an attempt to drown out the interest and the ability to voice one's interest through political means. It is rigging, if you will, elections before elections take place through the process of stealing the voices of individuals and therefore their interests. So when you hear that term more often than not, that's what you're hearing, and that's what you're hearing faith leaders. That's what they mean when they use that term. And I do agree. I do think illegal, wrong, and non-compassionate redistricting is a sin.
That's really powerful to have pastors leveraging their moral authority in this way on this civic issue. I think that's been outstanding. I've been seeing that term, but I just hadn't had a chance to put that together. And so it's really about gerrymandering. We've been talking about that term, and we're going to get into more details. But first, we're going to talk a little bit about process. So, Bill, there's some things happening at the State House right now, a lot of activity. So can you kind of bring us up to speed on maybe what has happened, what's going to happen, and really, why should the average citizen care?
Well, so let me set the stage for the process. So, of course, this occurs every 10 years when there's a census. And then as a product of both federal and state law, the state legislatures have to account for the population shifts that have occurred over that 10-year period. So here in Indiana, that means our 9 United States House of Representative districts and the 100 State House of Representative districts and the 50 state Senate districts need to be redrawn in order to account for these population shifts. And the census data was delayed because of COVID. So last month, the General Assembly, all the state legislatures received data from the Census Bureau that permits this process to kick in. So Tuesday, which was just yesterday, the days are certainly running together. I see Rima smiling. Yesterday, the leadership of the House of Representatives released proposed maps for the 9 congressional districts and the 100 House of Representative districts and started the hearings today. So 24 hours after releasing the maps, they expect Hoosiers to come in and provide some sort of analysis of it. It's just really shameful that more time hasn't been built into this process. So the second of 2 days of hearings on the maps will occur tomorrow at the State House at 10 a.m. And the process then will kick in. Next week, the House will move the legislation along, and the following week, the state Senate will add the state Senate maps. And the process is now set to wind up by the end of the month for a process, an outcome that will affect the civic life of Indiana for the next decade.
Wow. So that sounds like a lot of moving pieces. And my sense is your website, indianacitizen.org, that's a good place to find out what's going on.
Absolutely. We're doing our level best to report these developments as they occur. And I must say, as a matter of pride, I think IndianaCitizen.org contains in one place, aggregates and creates original journalism around this redistricting process that's unparalleled in Indiana right now. IndianaCitizen.org.
IndianaCitizen.org. Got it. So that's the place. It's kind of like a one-stop shop for finding out like kind of what's going on. It seems like I've been there, and it looks like you've even gone back to like last year in some of your articles, things of that nature. So we've been talking about this word, rima, and I know your organization did a study. So what is this gerrymandering thing? What is it? Can you tell us about the study that you commissioned? And really, like, why should people of color care about this issue?
Yeah, so gerrymander is to divide or arrange into election districts in a way that really gives one political party an unfair advantage, whereas redistricting is the process of developing fair maps within a state. And I learned something new from Bill every time I'm in his company. So I'm going to use his talking point and say, as a matter of pride for Women for Change, we commissioned a report by an independent professor who really took a look at Indiana's maps, our previous maps. And Dr. Warshaw's analysis of our previous maps showed that Indiana's General Assembly and legislative maps are more biased toward one party than 95% of maps enacted in every single other state in the United States of America over the past 50 years. So we are at the bottom of the bottom for the last 50 years. Bill also privately has shared with me that there might be folks that don't like the fact that Women for Change was able to commission this study, but nobody's ever provided a rebuttal to it. And legislators, advocates, activists, everyday citizens have all used this report. And it's really been an educational tool for folks that really don't understand the legislative and the redistricting process. Marshawn, you're a good friend of mine, and I've known you for many years, but I'm going to push back a little bit on the question as far as why people of color should care. At times when folks ask us that question, being a person of color myself, I feel like there might be some racial undertones to that. We are not simple-minded people. We can care about many different things at the same time. We can care about infrastructure and redistricting. We can care about K through 12 education and redistricting. We can care about healthcare and the fact that there are so many hospitals are having to turn away patients right now, and redistricting. And the fact is that each one of these issues does go back to the bedrock of our democracy, which is redistricting. Together, Latino, Black, and Asian American voters will account for 80% of the country's increase in eligible voters between 2010 and 2020, the last redistricting process. Since 2011, the number of eligible Black, Latino, and Asian Americans has grown at an extraordinary and exponential rate, with Latino Americans alone responsible for 40% of the growth. And I think because as America continues to be more brown and Black, people are going to push back to make sure that our voices are not truly represented, our voices are not heard, and our voices are packed in, whereas we're not represented within the halls of democracy, whether that's down at the Indiana State House or in Washington, D.C. It was just last year where we commemorated the 19th Amendment that gave some women the right to vote. It wasn't like women like me and others that we had to wait another 35 years. But still in Indiana, we've never seen Madam Governor or a woman senator. And it is so important, and it all goes back to redistricting.
That is an excellent point about sometimes the racial undertones of questions about people of colors if they only focus on one particular issue. Care about water, care about streets, care about all the things. So no, that is an excellent point. Well taken. So Pastor Posley, do you think our community has been able to connect this voter apathy that we sometimes see with this redistricting process? Has there been a connection made yet?
No, unfortunately, no. I don't think an adequate apathy or even clear understanding, if you will, of the major impact of redistricting and gerrymandering, if you will. But I want to kind of revisit what Shahid said, the previous point.
Yeah.
And while I do understand her point, I agree with everything she said, but I think there's also a reality that is often unspoken, that a great deal of the redistricting in Indiana and what keeps us at the bottom in terms of fair redistricting is the assault on people of color and the danger of people of color. I do believe that people of color can multitask. They can walk and chew gum at the same time. We have varied interests, and we are intelligent in those areas. But at the same time, there are some specific efforts. And in my personal view, I believe the redistricting in Indiana is as much about color as it is anything. I think if you look at where we are relative to Georgia's style of doing the same thing, it's about color. It's about color. The issues that frighten those who seek to act and you create sustained supermajorities has to do with the fear of the browning of America. And I think that's happening here, and it's being perpetuated. This attempt is to perpetuate that here. I think the motivation relative to your question, Marshawn, I think the motivation to get out to vote from the past, like in just previous election, is we're not. I don't think many people of color or enough people of color are understanding that what motivated them to vote in this recent election. The same type of danger is underway with this redistricting if the follow through happens. And I don't think enough people are getting it. I know we're going to talk a little later about what can be done, but I don't think enough people of color are informing themselves, availing themselves to panels like this one, and opening their understanding to the real power of the vote and why it is, and because that vote is such a threat, this is why that redistricting is happening the way it is. So I think relative to this issue, in my view, from my perspective, it is primarily about the danger of the browning of America, or the browning of
Indiana. So I know the Indiana citizens they've been talking about racial justice requires fair maps, and we got a question. It looks like it says, "Is voter apathy really the factor that is allowing this process to unfold the way that it is?" Bill was talking about the fact that, they release the map one day, have the meeting the next day in the middle of the day, and then they're going to have another hearing after that. It's almost like it was designed based to leverage our apathy.
Exactly. It is, in my view, it is designed. It takes advantage of the historical reality that there are not enough people of color who participate perennially in politics and the knowledge thereof. They are banking on it. And it's costing us, quite frankly. It's costing people of color. What they don't know, what we do not know often, is hurting us, particularly in my sphere, in churches.
So I think we have an opportunity to do some education here, and I'm gonna go to Bill. We mentioned these terms: packing, cracking, tacking, and bleaching. I had never connected this to the map drawing process. Can you help us understand what's going on with that?
Be happy to. Brandy, if you could pull up that map, I think this will help illustrate the point. So the first example of gerrymandering occurred in 1812. That is to say, the first time the name was applied to this process purposely manipulating these legislative lines in a way to advantage the party in power. And since then, of course, with the advent of technology, gerrymandering has become an evil art almost. I mean, the amount of information that's available to map drawers right now is just enormous, and the ability to move the lines around in order to advantage the party in power. And so this actually a vocabulary evolved. I mean, inside these rooms where the maps are being drawn, they developed their own vocabulary. Talk about cracking, meaning breaking up communities, particularly communities of color, and splitting them into other districts. Packing is the reverse of cracking. That is to say, packing communities, particularly communities of color, together in districts, and bleaching. That word means exactly what it sounds like, meaning taking voters of color out of an otherwise majority white district and moving them next door into a majority black. You bleach, right? You bleach the white district. And there's tacking and stacking and all. There's this whole vocabulary. But here's Exhibit A. All right, this is the proposed House districts within Marion County, and you have to squint a little bit to see them. But you look down in the lower left-hand corner, you see House District 91. Okay, that looks sort of compact and regular, but look closely at the other districts within Marion County and how they squirm and move around. That's done intentionally. Those lines follow communities of color, right? The map drawers couldn't figure out a way to draw 100 districts that would favor those in power, meaning there has to be some left over for the minorities. So what they do is they pack particularly voters of color into overwhelmingly black districts under the assumption that all these voters are going to vote Democratic, which is an insult all by itself, right? Can you imagine being a party that's so bereft of ideas that you're not willing to compete in November in a fair match between the two parties, and that's what this vocabulary suggests. Gerrymandering is the most effective and insidious form of voter suppression ever created. Why? Because it keeps people from showing up on election day, because the outcome of the election is predetermined. You may have read it in the Star, State Senator Jean Breaux, who ran last time without an opponent because she's in one of these packed districts, to her everlasting credit, said, this is a disservice to the voters in my district not to have a choice on election day. Give me a fair fight. Give me an opponent. And it'll be better for my constituents if I have an opponent.
That's actually a really good point.
It really is.
Because my experience when I go to the poll is generally that I don't have contested races. And I think that's I think that happens really a lot across Indiana, where we just, and so that is like the consequence, right, of gerrymandering. You have a political party that, because of the way the map is drawn, just makes a decision that we're not even going to engage those voters in that district because we're not going to win. And that must have policy implications, right? Yeah. I'm assuming, like, is that a fair assumption?
Well, it is, and I know Rima can speak very knowledgeably to this about what happens from a policy perspective when our legislative bodies don't represent the people of Indiana, right? The last census shows Indiana over the last 10 years becoming less rural and less white, right? The census showed that 23% of Hoosiers are non-white, and yet 11% of the members of the Indiana General Assembly are non-white. And the folks who drew these maps in an effort to perpetuate themselves in power are trying to set up a state legislature that looks a lot like the existing one. And the existing state legislature is not representative of the people of Indiana broadly. And that's how public policy gets distorted when a representative body is not, in fact, representative.
And I think my understanding is that both sides do this.
Oh, heck yeah. I mean, I'm old enough to have been around in 91 and 2001 when Democrats drew the maps, and they were guilty of the same sin. You just look into Illinois, where Democrats control the General Assembly there. It's just a grotesque process going on over in Springfield, Illinois, that's controlled by the Democrats. And it's wrong every time because it's corrosive. It has a corrosive effect on democracy itself.
So Bill is the media person. He has indianacitizen.org, and they do the coverage of the stories. But Rima and Dr. Posley, you're both activists. So I'm gonna go to Rima first. What can people do to have an impact on this issue from your perspective?
Yeah, as you all have mentioned, our General Assembly does not make it easy for folks to engage. Having meetings Monday through Thursday between 8 and 5 is really only for people with a lot of privilege can attend. Because if you are working, if you are a caregiver, if you are working and a caregiver, there is no way that you can make it down there. And as you all have mentioned, I don't think that's by coincidence. But if you are able to, without taking lost wages or taking time off, please come out to the State House. If you can't make it out there, call your elected official and ask them, am I being counted? Am I being counted fairly? Ask them, what are they doing about this process? As your elected official, they are supposed to have your best interest in mind when making decisions and represent you and your family. Are they actually doing that? I know that earlier you all were talking about primaries. A third, Dr. Warshaw's analysis showed that a third of legislative races ran unopposed in 2020. There's no competition. Historically, our system has been with two parties, and that allows for healthy debate, that allows for people to engage, for people to deliberate. Right now, we have one party that's drawing the map, which is the same party that's controlling the state house, which is the same party that's passing legislation. And frankly, what we saw in the 2021 legislative session was a complete waste of taxpayer dollars and time, because for the first time in that I can recall, we saw a civil dispute between the executive and legislative branch from both parties that belong to the same party. Because what gerrymandering does is it brings out the most polarizing and extreme candidates that don't represent either party. And we can certainly sit and name names right now, but we probably should do that once the recording is over. But if you want to learn more about Dr. Warshaw's study, please go to women4changeindiana.org/redistricting, and you'll find Dr. Warshaw's study there. But call your elected official if you are able to. Come out to the State House. There will be public hearing tomorrow as well as a rally. And then once the Senate maps are released, there will also be an option for public hearing at that time. But whatever way you can and you're able to, your schedule allows, your elected officials really need to hear from you because this is once in a decade opportunity. And as a mother of 3 children, I am often reminded that today's first graders are probably going to be voting the next time this happens.
Wow. That is, I hadn't thought about that. Can you give us that website again?
It's women4changeindiana.org/redistricting.
And there they can find the analysis performed by Dr. Warshaw that demonstrates that Indiana, and this is a professor, so he's not even, is he from Indiana? I don't even think he's from Indiana, right?
He's not from Indiana. He has looked at other maps from other states before and provided analysis that have made it all the way to the Supreme Court, the highest court in our nation. There's a 42-page report, but if you're like me, there's also an executive summary. So you can find both on our website.
And there's been no rebuttal, so it's not like it's contested. It's
well, and moreover, the map drawers have never subjected the current maps to this kind of independent, rigorous examination. So they haven't rebutted Professor Warshaw's study, nor have they been able, nor could they produce an independent analysis of their own that would come to any other conclusion. So the word gerrymandering isn't just an epithet, a slogan, just a word that's thrown around here. This is demonstrably, it's scientifically demonstrated to be among the worst in the country over a 50-year period.
So, okay. So we're at this process. We're going to go into a legislative session. It'll be a short session pretty soon here. What legislation should we be trying to enact that would have an impact on this process? And that's for anybody. Like what legislation should we be trying to see? I've done a little research, and I know that some states make it so that you can't consider incumbency in the process. Some folks have commissions. What are just some ideas folks have been talking about from a legislative perspective?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. Yeah. So groups like Common Cause, the League of Women Voters, and others that have been supplemented in the last few years by great groups like Women for Change have been trying to get Indiana to pass some form of independent redistricting process. And, this has been a classic example of sort of bait and switch and all sorts of legislative maneuvers that have kept that from becoming law in Indiana. But, to their everlasting credit, Common Cause assembled a coalition, All In for Democracy, that is supporting an independent redistricting commission. 9 great Hoosiers, very diverse group from all over the state, various backgrounds. And tomorrow, they are going to deliver to the House of Representatives examples of what fair maps look like. Right. So, they don't have any authority under law. They should. 16 states have gone to the point of enacting, either through constitutional amendment or legislation, these independent redistricting mechanisms. Because that's the permanent solution here, right? Is for the General Assembly to just fess up, okay, that they have a built-in conflict of interest, right? When they're drawing these maps, nobody wants to take away their legal authority to enact them into law, but get input from folks who don't have such a stake in the outcome. And it's been often said that gerrymandering is a process in which legislators are choosing who their voters are rather than voters choosing who their representatives are. And there's no clearer example of that than what's been going on in Indiana. It's become a tradition, but it's a tradition that is really a major contributor to our poor civic health.
So, Dr. Posley, I know that you have to go because you're a pastor and you got to go do some preaching. So, wanted to get your
I don't want to go.
I wanted to get your thoughts on what pastors can do to fight back on this issue. What do you think congregations need to understand? And just, what are faith leaders saying about this?
There is I'm going to kind of answer the question in a roundabout way, but I think this is important to say. Bill, Raymond, you guys are brilliant, and I'm going to tie it into what I want to say. There is this notion happening in theological circles now that the term intersectionality really shouldn't play a part in whether and how a person comes to know God. I totally disagree with that. I believe that this gathering is an example of how theology, politics, social justice issues all intersect. I can't successfully do my job and minister to the holistic person who will join my church if I don't have relationships with Bill, Rima, and Marshawn, because all of what each of you do affect what the person who has come to me. I meet this person in the neighborhood. They accept Christ, or they come to church, and I want to help them out of ignorance, not stupidity, but ignorance about their society, about their culture, and about the way the world functions. I need what Bill does. I need the excellence and the research of what Rima does. And I have already printed off the doctor's 42-page, looked like a dissertation to me as I was reading it. But I've already printed it off, and I plan to use it in a forum where I establish a department of racial, social justice, and political activism in my congregation. That's something I'm going to be setting up. So one of the things that pastors can do is to inform your people beyond theology. I think it is an injustice for a pastor to have members and they don't cause them to get this knowledge. The book in the book of Hosea, chapter 4 and verse 6, that passage says that God says his people are destroyed because of a lack of knowledge. Basically, what they don't know is killing them. And so pastors have to make this a part of the time they spend and the rhetoric they set forth with their people. And I want to go on record as saying they're doing them an injustice. And so pastors have to work together, and not just with other pastors. Most pastors have some theological stance that is the dogma of their religious expression. And I'm not seeking to take that away, but it needs to include a clearer understanding of what Women for Change is trying to help them understand. It needs to include what the Indiana Citizens for Education is trying to accomplish. And without that, I can't successfully minister to the holistic needs of my people. So I can one, seek collaboration with others so that I can educate my people. And number two, I can stop the notion that theology itself alone is going to change the world. It's not. Theology, but also political participation and understanding of your situatedness in the world and how people are seeking to take away your representation despite the fact that you're situated in the world with them.
Well, you said a word, Pastor.
Amen.
Amen. You said a word. We appreciate you joining us. I know you have to be about your vocation. So
and I don't hate to have to. I don't hate to have to go. I just hate that I have to go. But I'm telling you, man, this is the kind of conversation, Marshawn, and you're known for this. And so I applaud you to what you're doing, but I do have to go. But thank you all for what you're doing. I do plan to be there tomorrow, and whatever way I can participate. And I don't mind being led in areas where others are experts. And any person that can't follow others really won't make a really good leader, he or herself. So,
well, Reverend Mosley, I hope that you testify tomorrow, and I hope you testify with the amount of passion that you bring to this discussion, and look at those legislators straight in the eye and tell them that what they are doing is offensive to God. because
I
don't.
feel that way.
I wouldn't have the credibility or credentials to say that. I know for a fact it is a civic sin. It's a civic sin to
It most certainly is.
abuse your power to perpetuate your power. But you have the moral authority to look those legislators right in the eye and tell them what they already know. They know what they're doing is wrong. Gerrymandering is not a sin of omission. It's a sin of commission. When you're moving those lines around, you know exactly what you're doing and why you're doing it.
And if I might add, Marshawn, if I might add, is it okay?
Yeah, sure.
By and large, those who perpetuate this notion on either side of the aisle do so in the name of God or in the name of some expression of religion very often. There is no consistent, and I've studied this a little bit, there is no major expression of religion that does not in some way seek to bring unity and peace among its believers. Whether it's Buddhist, Muslim, Christian, or Shinto, whatever the case, there is no major expression of what's called the big five religions that do not seek to bring unity among community and peace. Division is a tool of the enemy's work, and it does not ever make us better. This is not going to help us. This is going to further divide us, making places for aggressive disagreement to be expanded. It is. Gerrymandering is sin. Redistricting is necessary. I don't have an issue with that. But gerrymandering is sin. It's wrong. It's an attempt to divide a people and to squash their representation. That's never the godly or moral thing to do.
Racial justice requires fair maps.
Absolutely.
Fair maps. One of the pieces that I think we're still living with, Rima, and I think this goes maybe back even to the founding of your organization. We talked about aggressive disagreement, was the 2010 maps, right? They drew the 2010 maps, and we saw issues like RFRA. We saw issues like the inability to get a hate crimes law, and just other issues that just haven't been able to move forward, like addressing food insecurity. From your perspective, what did the 2010 maps do to policy discussions and even maybe civic culture in Indiana?
Yeah, if I may, before I get into that question, I know that Pastor Posley had to leave us, but I really wish I could just come and sit in to his church service. And to any of my Muslim brothers and sisters that may be listening today, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, he did not become Muslim until he was in his 40s. But before that, he was a leader in his community because he was civically and politically engaged. Your faith is not limited to the four walls of the mosque. Your faith is not limited to you praying 5 times a day. Your faith is not limited to you not fasting in the month of Ramadan or going to Hajj. Your faith demands you to be politically and civically engaged, as did our dear Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. So if you think you're an outstanding Muslim because you're praying and doing all these things, you may be right. But I encourage you and challenge you to take it a step further and follow in his footsteps. Because if he was here today, I know he would be encouraging Muslims to get involved and make sure that our voices were heard, that we were truly represented. While I applaud first this past election cycle, we have the first Muslim senator join the State House as Senator Kadura. I look forward to the day where we're no longer celebrating first because it's become a normal. And unfortunately, because we're packed into districts, we're really not seeing that. I pray for a day where my children walk into the State House and it is as diverse as the census data shows Indiana to be. yet we're not seeing that. And what we did see from the 2010 maps are session after session, we're talking about pregnancy accommodations, because Indiana continues to have terrifying maternal infant mortality statistics, yet we can't pass something that's meaningful to women. We are seeing women being forced out of the workplace, yet we're not doing anything to pass laws to support women in the workplace. We're passing laws that really don't help majority of Hoosiers, because the folks that are in that building don't represent majority of Hoosiers. We're going in there and trying to fight a good fight, but losing because our state house doesn't look like this call.
Well, the
And
state house unfortunately looks too much like this old fat white guy, right? That needs to change. I mean, you cannot argue with the census data. There are 200,000 fewer white Hoosiers than there were 10 years ago. There are 500,000 more Hoosiers of color than there were 10 years ago. Right? As I mentioned, fully a quarter of Hoosiers are non-white, and only 11% of the members of the General Assembly are. That is not a representative legislature.
And so when folks are frustrated at the lack of progress within the halls of our Indiana General Assembly, it's because we don't have a fair redistricting process, because our state is so gerrymandered. We shouldn't have to live in a state where we rank 5th highest in the nation as far as sexual assault among high school girls. We should have passed laws around consent a few years ago. We shouldn't have to live in a state where there are not enough birthing hospitals and people are having to drive long distances or have doctors that don't believe them, and therefore that's detrimental to their life. We should live in a state. I love Indiana. I'm born and raised in Indiana, but we should live in an Indiana that's welcoming and safe for everyone. And we can do that by having fair districts.
So let's get a reminder to everyone on the process and the tools that they can use to kind of engage on this issue. First, if they go to indianacitizen.org, Bill, can you tell us what they'll find?
Well, if you want to get educated about this issue, and you can set aside any from a half an hour to all day. We have so much information packed there. But it's up to date. There was the hearing today. There's already a report on indianacitizen.org about what went on in that hearing. There's a lot of detailed, deep, long form journalism. And there's a little place you can click on that's the little button that says Fight Gerrymandering. That'll connect you to organizations like RIMA's. We're an information platform. We're not an action organization. But there are a number of outstanding action organizations like RIMA's that are really doing the real work of communicating directly with legislators and those who influence legislators about how these maps ought to look. And I've spent or misspent much of my life over at the Indiana State House. And I know that those legislators do respond when people show up. And don't let the COVID situation deter you from going to the State House. Put a mask on, and that'll probably differentiate you from the legislators who are in power over there. But put a mask on and go over there and let your voice be heard. Literally, let your voice be heard. The fundamental unfairness of what's going on right now should not go unchallenged. Thank
you, Bill. And Rima, you talked about a report and a website. Can you help us understand what, if they go to your website, what they will learn and what your organization is working on this issue?
Yep. Again, you can go to www.women4changeindiana.org/redistricting. You can find Dr. Warshaw's entire report. You also find the executive summary. You also find important information, terms like packing and cracking. You also find a tool for you that will directly link you to your elected officials where you can make your voice heard, and reach out to them electronically. That way, send them an email, or you can also place a call. I would encourage you to stay involved in this issue, stay engaged in this issue. As today, as I mentioned, it is International Day of a Democracy. Our democracy demands our participation, and frankly, we have to stay engaged for the sake of the future of Indiana and for our children.
And also, it needs to be said that the forces in favor of fair maps are not just a bunch of Democrats or wannabe Democrats or used to be Democrats. And that was best underscored in today's hearing. There was incredibly powerful testimony delivered by a woman by the name of Martha Lampkin. And Martha didn't credentialize herself before she spoke. She did a little bit, but she didn't go into her history and her husband, Ned Lampkin's history as among the most active, engaged Republicans, certainly in Marion County, if not the state, for decades, right? The unfairness of these maps, these gerrymandered maps, are clear to people of goodwill who believe in democracy, to believe in the contests of ideas that occur when there are actually, contested races. And I hope we're going to post this. I hope everybody has a chance to watch Martha Lampkin's testimony. It's incredibly powerful, and just further underscores how broad across Indiana this concern is about these gerrymandered maps and the effect that these maps have had on the civic health of Indiana. That was Martha's number one point: is you're trying to kill democracy, right? These, again, it's not unique to one party or the other, right? Having spent a little time misspent a little time in partisan politics myself, right? These can be pretty cynical folks who are happy to get 51% of the vote, meaning to win in a 20% turnout environment. They still win, but that is unhealthy. And the trends in Indiana are absolutely inescapable. You can't, the data don't lie. I mean, even when we have record turnout, as we did this past November, we're going to drop down in the ranking of states because turnout across the country was so high. We needed to increase turnout by 20% last year, even to crack the top half of states. And we increased turnout by 9%. Great. Congratulations. Except we're still going to fall farther down in the bottom 10 of states for turnout. And that low turnout starts with gerrymandered maps. When you decide in advance who's going to win an election, voters can figure that out and have figured it out.
Well, thank you to the audience for being with us. We've had an hour of learning about hacking, cracking, tacking, bleaching, about maps, and about the political process and its connection to it. We do hope that you take advantage of the resources, and more importantly, that you do avail yourself of your rights as citizens to participate in any process and activity that you deem appropriate. And so you have the websites in www.indianacitizen.org, as well as www.womenforchangeindiana.org/redistricting. My name is Marshawn Wally. I'm Indianapolis Recorder columnist, and the Indiana Citizen Education Foundation is a client of mine, but appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all this evening. Thank you so much. See you next time.